So as a lot of you may know, I watch a bunch of seasonal anime, upwards of 20 every season, and I can't help but notice an all-around lack of creativity in this medium. And no, I'm not talking about the actual shows. Sure, each season tends to have multiple generic power fantasy shows, but that's not my point. I'm talking about the visuals. I know that this is probably not the best time to talk about this concept. After all, the previous fall season had shows like Mob Psycho, Chainsawman, and Butchie the Rock, while this season has two different fully CGI shows, as well as titles like Vinland Saga Season 2 and the new AOT episode. All of these shows are very creative visually speaking, each in their own different ways. But this observation of mine spans across several seasons of anime and through multiple years. Most modern anime shows don't look creative. Now, what does creative even mean in this context? Does every show need to look like a Mob Psycho or a Ping Pong the Animation? Oh god no, that would be awful. Those shows with those specific art styles work because of how unique they look. If every show looked like that, their novelty would be gone. Should every show look like a Chainsaw Man and emulate a live action feel with constant character acting? Again, no. Because of the same reason, and also because even if the anime industry was all sunshine and rainbows, a production of that caliber would not be possible for multiple shows. Here's how I define visual creativity. In order to be visually creative, a show should have an unique visual identity. What does that mean? It means that at least some element of a show's visuals should look unique. It can be a minor element, maybe just the color palette or the style of the line work, or even the character designs. Just something that sets it apart from its contemporaries. Visual creativity is not about constant sakuga, and it's not about extremely quirky art styles. A show can mostly look normal and still be visually creative. In fact, I feel like most shows should not stray too far away from the regular blueprint of anime visuals. Because again, if they do, the novelty and uniqueness of shows like Mob Psycho takes a huge hit. So why does the medium rarely feature creative visuals? Why is it that most shows have that same set design? Why do most shows suffer from what I like to call the Sword Art Online effect? AKA, they have that same generic, soulless, easy to draw character designs. Well, there's one major reason. One main reason which branches out into several different reasons. There are way too many shows being produced every single year. Way too many. To put it in perspective, the winter of 2012 had 23 new shows. The winter of 2020 had 33 new shows. And the currently ongoing winter season of 2023 has, checks notes, 51 new shows. 51. Now, why is that an issue, you may ask? Well, firstly, the amount of shows increasing so drastically over the years leads to the talent within the industry being stretched thin. I've talked about this topic in more detail in a previous video, but the idea is that there are only so many veteran animators and directors in the industry, and they can be involved with only so many shows. On top of that, a lot of high-profile productions have multiple veterans working on them. For example, the Chainsaw Man staff features multiple people who can carry an entire production by themselves. The likes of Tatsuya Yoshihara, Hironori Tanaka, Shunen Okido, and more. And due to these veterans, a lot of younger talent also gravitates towards these high-profile shows. This leaves the remaining majority of anime with next to no noteworthy talent. Also, more shows generally means less production time. This reduced production time affects nearly every show regardless of how high-profile they are. However, these high-profile shows generally manage to pull through without too many significant dents on its all-around visual quality, simply because of the amount of veterans working on them. Shows with lesser production values are not that lucky. In many cases, the goal isn't to produce a polished final product. The goal is to produce a product. Polish is a luxury that very few shows can afford. Isekai Oji-san, Unite Up, Nier Automata, Ayakashi Triangle, Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible, The Misfit of Demon King Academy Season 2, Bofuri Season 2, Spy Classroom, Masamune's Revenge Season 2, Pastel Lawrence, Fate's Strange Fake, The Black Clover Movie, and Solo Leveling. These are all 2023 shows that have been delayed, and we aren't even 4 months in. It's kinda terrifying, is it not? The funny cough is the reason provided for a lot of these delays, however a lot of people are questioning the validity of that excuse. Even if it is true, it's only proof of how heavily the Japanese anime industry relies on outsourcing, not just to other studios but also to Chinese companies. So in this industry where so many shows struggle to exist at this point, do you really think that shows with average production values can afford visual creativity. Do you think staff members can take their time and do something different? They cannot. There's this show that's currently airing called Adventurers Who Don't Believe in Humanity Will Save the World. The show tries some creative storyboarding, but it's very limited and ends up looking really bad at times as a result. Most shows avoid this by taking the generic visuals approach. All of these problems can be traced back to the amount of shows being made. That's what causes the talent to be stretched too thin, which in turn leads to excessive outsourcing. That's also what leads to an all-around reduced production time across the industry. Not trying to be visually creative generally allows for a less risky production, which is preferable as there's no guarantee that visually creative shows will also be commercially successful. Sure, shows like Bocchi the Rock did large numbers, but that's not always the case. I don't think too many producers would like a modern repeat of the Red Line fiasco. So far, I've talked about this issue from a creative and a logistical point of view. But what about the audience and their perspective? Does the audience want shows to look creative? I really don't know. In the last few years, most visually creative approaches have been hated on. People think Ren Onodera's cut in Boruto is badly animated. People hate on any and all uses of CGI. So many people had a problem with the new Slam Dunk movie or the Trigun Stampede anime. People think Hiroshi Hamasaki's storyboards in that one Attack on Titan episode is bad because trees or whatever. People think the character acting in that one Attack on Titan episode is bad. People think Chainsaw Man is a bad adaptation, for fuck's sake. Chainsaw Man. Whenever a visually creative approach is taken, people seem to have a problem with it. I can assure you that if it was the first season of Mob Psycho that aired last fall, not the third, and if it was the adaptation of an extremely popular source material, there would have been a lot of backlash against it. The only reason why Mob gets a pass is because the first season of this show aired back in 2016, and back then half the audience did not pretend to be experts on direction and animation. Most people didn't really care all that much about the visual look of a show. Over the years, people got the idea that Mob is really well animated, and that's why most people appreciate the show's visuals. The action in the third season of Mob Psycho was fairly weak compared to the previous seasons, but barely anyone talked about that, because most of these self-proclaimed animation experts don't exactly think for themselves. I'm sure the audience's reaction, especially the Western audience's reaction, has very little impact on the actual creative side of the anime industry, and thank God for that. But still, I feel like I need to point this out. It seems like a large amount of people simply don't want creativity. They want their manga adaptations to be one-to-one recreations, and I know that's also what a large portion of Japanese fans want, at least so I've been told. So if being visually creative leads to an all-around financial loss, and it's not really appreciated by the fans, domestic and worldwide, why should shows be creative? What's the point? Most rom-com anime looks the same, most isekai fantasy shows looks the same. A lot of action-oriented shows still manage to get away with some amount of creativity, but still, it's not fun watching a light novel you like get the most basic-looking adaptation imaginable. It's not fun watching a manga you like get the colored one-to-one still frame treatment. In fact, a few hours back as of this recording, a teaser for the anime adaptation of Berserk of Gluttony got released. Berserk of Gluttony being a light novel that I quite enjoyed, and as you'd expect, the anime looks basic. They showed very little, so I'll keep my hopes up, but you get my point, don't you? I haven't watched anime for long enough to hit you with the good old days quote, but a casual glance at the seasonal anime charts from a few years back does suggest that the amount of basic looking, fairly pointless adaptations used to be a bit less back then. So yeah, long story short, moral of the story, whatever you wanna call it, the anime industry follows the quantity over quality approach. Since the anime industry isn't exactly a single entity, it's hard to pin the blame on the appropriate parties. The production companies and committees obviously have a huge role to play. The amount of shows they fund is a major factor that led us to this predicament. Remember that large list of delayed shows I talked about? Well, Aniplex is involved with a lot of those shows. Do you know what else Aniplex is involved with? Demon Slayer. I hope it's not adversely affected, and I doubt it will be. Before I get sidetracked again, let me end this thing. This was just a topic I wanted to talk about. That's about it. Speaking of Demon Slayer, did the Entertainment District arc really look that good, or are people overhyping it? Click the video on screen for my opinion on that topic. Make sure to like and subscribe, and until next time.